I am all out of home gym content, and I know that breaks some of your hearts, right? I posted all the videos, I've edited all the footage, and now I've had a couple weeks to sit back and really think about the event. Not only just the stuff that I looked at, the stuff that I brought home, but what did I learn at the event? And that's what we're going to talk about today on the GymCrafter podcast. Welcome back to the GymCrafter podcast, everybody. My name is Tim. I am the head gym nerd here at GymCrafter.com, and I have got a great podcast for you guys today, or at least I think I do. It's been a few weeks since I got back from Home Gym Con, and I don't know about you guys, but I have watched all of the Home Gym Con videos that I care to watch. I even thought about not putting the word Home Gym Con in the thumbnail of this podcast, simply so that more people would watch it. But today I've got something a little bit different for you. You know, it's one thing to talk about all the booth tours and all the products that were there and things like that, but it's another thing to really take a step back and think about, you know, what do you learn at an event like this? One of my favorite things about going to Home Gym Con and going to other conventions is we live in a world where most of the things that you buy or most of the things that you bring in your life, a lot of times you can only see them online, right? You don't get a chance to see it and feel it and hold it in your hands. You don't get a chance to get a feel for the company behind that product. You just kind of click, you know, buy now on Amazon, and a day later it shows up at your door, hopefully in one piece. But with an event like this, there's some things that like I said, when I sit back and I think about it, there's some things that I learned that really were different than what my expectations were going into the event. And that's what I want to talk about today on the podcast is 11 things that I learned at Home Gym Con that I want to share with you guys because I think they're a little bit interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these in the comment section below. I'm sure that some of these are going to be a little bit of a hot take on things, but let's get started with thing number one that I actually learned from all of you guys, and that is I'm really 6'6", so it's kind of a throwaway one, but I had to mention it because as I went around and I met so many of you guys there at the event, the number one thing that I probably like 75 to 80% of you said to me first thing was, oh wow, you really are tall in real life. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't come across on video or what it is, but I'm 6'6", and right now I weigh like 232 pounds. Not all of those pounds are in the right place, but most of them are. And I forget that I'm a large individual. That's 6'6" and 230 is like not a small person, right? So when I'm walking around a convention center, I forget how big I look next to everybody else. And I think that this is the first time a lot of you have seen me next to other people and everybody else is like down here. It's awesome at a concert, guys. I'm telling you, you go to a concert at 6'6" and you never got a bad seat in the house. You just don't want to have to fly to that concert because airplane seats are terrible. But in the end, I had an awful lot of you tell me that I really was 6'6". So I did learn that. I really am 6'6". But outside of that, let's get to 10 things that have to do with the actual event itself and the stuff that I saw. And I want to start with really the first people I ran into when I walked into the Home Gym Con floor on Thursday. I went there as they were setting up, and I walked in, and one of the first booths was RitFit. And the 3 people or the 4 people at RitFit, their eyes all lit up. I hadn't met any of them in real life. I've talked to most of them via email, but they couldn't have been nicer, guys. I mean, it was really cool. They were really excited to show me their equipment and what they brought to the show. And what I realized was that, you know, I've said this before, that there's definitely a place for budget level equipment. And if you're going to buy budget level equipment, I just was reinforced. The thing that I learned was that I'm making the right recommendation when I tell you that if RitFit makes something that fits your needs, that's probably the right company to go with if you're at that kind of budget or entry level type of equipment for your gym. And that's honestly, that's true for most people. I'm going to get to a point, the last point, which really has to do with how many customers are out there for that type of stuff. And what I learned at the RitFit booth was that, you know, they're the only company out there at that level who is making things because they want to make things that are good for your gym. I saw an interview, and I've mentioned this before as well, with their marketing officer, and he basically said, we're not trying to be the best. We're not out to say that we're the best. We are good enough for most people. And that level of honesty really comes through. They're not trying to be the best. They're not trying to make the biggest, baddest, you know, shiniest piece. They're just trying to make things that are good for your gym. And they brought a bunch of prototypes, which all reflected feedback from the people that use their equipment. You know, there were some other budget level companies there, which I'll talk about next, but you could tell that those companies they don't take any feedback from anybody. They just do what they're going to do. And we'll talk about what that is. But RitFit really, they definitely impressed me. So one thing that I learned was that like I said, if you are at that level of product, and it's not a bad level to be at, you just want to be careful of what you buy. And I think that you've got a good safe bet going with RitFit. Is it always going to be a home run? Absolutely not. Are you always going to get the absolute best customer service? No. But again, of that kind of range of product, I really do think that they're the best bet, and I did learn that by getting in front of not only them, but their equipment. And I gotta tell you guys, they've got some really cool stuff coming out. They've got some really cool cable attachments coming out. They're really working hard on building things that are like different colors and different designs and things like that, that your average home gym owner really likes, right? So, you know, one of my goals, and I know one of Jake's goals who runs Home Gym Con, is to get a home gym. You know, I think a home gym should be in every home in the country. I think it should be as ubiquitous as a bathroom or a dining room. Like, I think it should just be part of everyone's life. There's so many good things that come from it. The problem is that, you know, when we all get together in our little groups and we're like, oh, how much did you put into your home gym? Well, I'm like at 50 grand right now. Like, most people aren't going to do that. And most people are like, I want to buy like a thing off of Amazon and put it in the corner of my garage and then hopefully work out. And man, if we can really help more people get access and, you know, get an entry into the home gym space through companies like RitFit, where I also know not only are they going to be, you know, attractive and they're going to match people's decor and they're like, oh, it's cool colors, but I also know that it's actually going to be fairly well built and it's going to work for what they need it for, and it's not going to fall apart in a year. You know, I think that RitFit really fills a good slot there. And so, like I said, I was really kind of impressed with what they brought to the show, and I just reinforced, I don't know that I really learned that, but it reinforced my opinion that, you know, if somebody asked me for a recommendation at a lower price point, that's really going to be my go-to. Which brings me to the second thing that I learned at Home Gym Con, which is that marketing companies just can't compete with fitness gear companies. And let me explain the difference. So when I went to Home Gym Con this year, I sat down with myself and I said, look, you've got some prejudices going in, 100%. There are a couple companies that were going to be there who I just don't like off the bat. Major Fitness is one of them, and Makolo was another one. I've never had a good experience. I've always had a bad taste in my mouth. But you know what? I'm like, you know what? Good on them. They're going to bring booths, and Major Fitness had one of the biggest booths at the show. They ponied up and they're like, they're going to go to this show, right? And they're going to show their stuff next to legit gym equipment, right? Those two and RitFit were like, we're stepping up. We're going to put our stuff on the floor next to the nicest stuff in the world, and we're going to be proud of it, right? And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they've developed their gear a little bit better. Maybe they've made some improvements. And while I think that that's true of RitFit, I do think that they stood up well against all the competition on the floor. Major Fitness and Makolo just didn't. And I really drove home that they were marketing companies more than fitness companies. Like I said, RitFit's goal is to make stuff that's good enough for your average home gym owner, which I think is a great goal as a company. When you went to the Major Fitness booth, and I talked about this in my live stream, one of my live streams, is you go to this huge booth and there was no equipment there. Like, there was legit almost no equipment there. So Major Fitness had this gigantic, I think it was the third largest booth at the show. And what they had was they had a lot of open floor space. They had a bunch of tables and chairs. They had a couple of arcade games, like one of those punching bag games, and they had another like a carnival, like hit the thing with a hammer game, so you could like come by and test your strength. They had hired a model to work the booth. It was the only place. It reminded me of like car shows in the 80s. Like, it was the only place, and there were lots of attractive women and attractive men at the show, but because that's just part of being in the fitness industry, right? There's just a lot of attractive people. But this was the only booth where they had hired somebody just to be attractive, right? They had a DJ there, they were blaring music, they were doing, you know, it was just kind of that kind of a feel. And it was very focused on the marketing and the glitz and the show of it all, and it was not focused at all on the equipment. They had their F-22 Raptor rack there, they had their B-52, and they had their leg press. I think they had one more thing. All stuff that's been around forever, all stuff that I've had in this gym actually, all stuff that I wouldn't recommend to people I don't like, let alone people that I do like. But it was very clear, because the equipment was shoved towards like the back edge of their booth, like they were not focused on showing people equipment. They were just focused on marketing, right? And cool, that's like their marketing company. That became very clear to me. And it became very clear to me that marketing companies just can't compete in real life, because when you went and looked at like the Makolo rack and you just went and looked at anybody else's stuff, you very quickly saw that it's just not all that great, right? So there's a big difference between marketing companies and actual fitness companies. And that's why when people said, oh, was Jacked Up Fitness there? No, because Jacked Up Fitness is a marketing company. I've said it before, I'll say it again. They're not making the best stuff. I've trained on their stuff. It's not that great. I'd put it in the same level of quality as the Major Fitness and the Mikolo stuff. You know, it's kind of like trying to find the shiniest turd in the litter box. You just pick a turd and they're all kind of the same. So I know that's harsh, but that's how I feel. I always try and be honest with you guys, but it really, what I learned was that marketing companies just maybe, you know, and I hate to take away a big vendor from Jake, but I don't think the show would have been any lesser if Major Fitness hadn't been there. Like, just, you know, if you can't stand up and you can't show a product that's competitive, then maybe just stick to the online marketing and don't bring it to people in real life. All right, so from that Debbie Downer point, we're gonna move on to something that actually really surprised me in the opposite way. And something that I went into the show with a preconceived notion of. So I went into the show thinking that I really wanted to try this product, but I was 99.9% sure that I didn't like it before I ever tried it. I was like, I'm not gonna like it. I had a whole bunch of reasons why I wasn't gonna like it. I had already decided that it was too expensive, that it wasn't ever something I was gonna put in my gym. But hey, they were gonna be at the show, so I'm gonna try it because that's part of the reason why you go to the show, right? And I gotta say that it really changed my mind. And that product is the Voltra by Beyond Power. They didn't have a booth there. I really wish they had. I think they would have done really well. But there were Voltras at several booths because it was an easy way to provide a cable attachment without having to install a whole selectorized cable rack, right? Like, I know Matt Porter had one to show off his cable accessories. Darko had one. There was one at one more booth. I don't remember who it was, but there were a few of them floating around. So I actually got a chance to go try the Voltra. So let me tell you what I went into the show thinking. So I think that we're in an age, I'm gonna get a little weird and esoteric here, but this will all make sense, I promise, that while digital solutions are on paper better for most things, I think that we've given up a lot of analog in our lives, and I think that the analog is oftentimes better for us as people than the digital stuff, even though the digital stuff is on paper. So let me give you an example. My whole career when I was in corporate land, I used a paper planner. I wrote everything down. I started every single day by sitting down at my desk, pulling out my paper planner, checking my calendar. Even once Google Calendar and all that stuff had come around, I stuck to paper. And I made my to-do list on paper, and I wrote my notes at meetings on paper. And I know a lot of you guys out there who are young folks are like cringing right now. But what they're seeing now and what they're finding now is that your memory retention, your ability to comprehend things, just your overall ability to just kind of be more involved mentally in life is actually enhanced by writing things down manually. And it turns out that even though Google Calendars and digital planners and you know, Asana boards and Todoist task lists, like those are all on paper better, more efficient ways to do things. Apple Notes and iCal and all of that. And those can definitely run things really well. And I use some of those things still to this day. When I shifted to doing GymCrafter full time, I'm like, oh, I'm done with this paper planner. I'm just gonna go, I've got my iCal up. I've got my Notes app on my phone. I use Todoist, which is a pretty good to-do app. I use another program called Dynalist. So I do use some software. And what I realized is my productivity just went through the floor. It absolutely went through the floor. So even while all of those things are better on paper for productivity than pulling out a pen and paper and writing things down, I've recently gone back. I bought what's called an e-ink tablet, which is a digital way to still take handwritten notes. And I gotta tell you, man, my cognition is better, my memory is better, my drive is better, my completion percentage on tasks way better. Like, my productivity has gone through the roof, switching back to that sitting down every day and planning my day on paper. So that was a very long way of saying that I think that that's a great analogy to what I thought of the Voltra. In my mind, while the Voltra on paper, you can make a case for it being better in almost every way. In my mind, there's something about the analog feeling of putting weights on a barbell that's just advantageous. And I'll give you a great example. So as a guy, one of a lot of guys I know's goals is to bench 225. And the way that you do that is you start with, I remember when I started back into the gym seriously, and this is quite a few years ago now, I could barely bench 95 pounds for 3 reps, right? So I remember, I don't know if I told the story before, but I went into the gym at work and I hadn't worked out in a long time. I had recovered from some health issues and I'm like, it's time to start working out again. And I've worked out my whole life. So I went into the gym to just get work. I'm like, I'm gonna start lifting again, right? So I went over to the bench and I think I put like 185 on the bar. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna knock out 3 sets of 10 with 185, and I couldn't get 185 off the hooks. So I'm like, oh, let me take these quarters off here. So I took the 25s off, I just left 135 on there, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna be able to do one, and I had to go all the way down to 95 pounds, and I could barely rep out 3 reps, and talk about a humbling time. Well, that, a long time ago, the journey from there to now my goal was to get back to I want to be able to bench 225 again. So as I worked at that and as I kind of endeavored to hit that goal, and I know a lot of you guys can relate, whether it's a squat goal or a deadlift goal, there's just something about being able to put a bigger plate on the bar. When I finally moved from loading 25s on there to 35s, and then when I moved from 35s to plates into 45 pounds, and then I got to a plate and a quarter, which is 45s and 25s. I remember the first time I got back to putting 225 on the bar, and I loaded 245s on either side, and just loading the bar, let alone repping out that one, and that's 1 rep max right at that point. It was like, that was it. I'm still not a whole lot above that. But putting those weights on the bar, seeing that weight on the bar, seeing those plates grow over time, to me is one of the single most rewarding things of weight training that you just get from the process at all. And Voltras take that away, right? Voltras are like, boop, 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 225. That doesn't mean anything to me, right? So that was my attitude going in, and it's still my attitude. I don't think Voltras will replace standard weight training. Now, I do think that they have a place for people who don't have room for weights, right? If you don't have room for a rack, you don't have room for a set of dumbbells, you don't have room for that stuff, you live in an apartment, you want something in your office, you want something you can travel with, they're awesome for that. I think they're a fantastic solution piece. But as far as a dedicated garage gym, I just don't think that they're going to replace weights, or at least that they're going to be good at that. And to me, it's the same thing as going back to a paper planner. I'll never just go away from the analog of just slapping plates on a barbell, right? However, Voltras do some really cool stuff, guys. There's a couple things that I did not expect. First of all, the fact that you can program them to do so many different things to create a training effect that you just can't create. The fact that you could do a heavier eccentric than concentric. Okay, I just said that and I've heard that before in the marketing material, but when you actually do it, when you curl up and all of a sudden it gets heavier on the way down and you feel the pump in your bicep doing that, or you're doing a cable fly and it's easier one way than the other way, to be able to do that is amazing. To be able to program in drop sets where you're I want to do this many reps at this weight and then drop to this weight and then drop to this weight. And the whole time I'm like, man, this would have taken, even they've got all these fancy pop pins now for stacks. If it's plates, you're stopping to take plates off. And this was just a lot, there's all kinds of really cool things. But I'll tell you my favorite thing. So as I get older, one of the things that I find myself training for more and more is athleticism. Because I'll tell you what, guys, as you get old, one of the things that goes away really quickly is athleticism. Sometimes I jump down off, I take my dogs to the park all the time and I'll jump down off of a log. And man, I hit the ground and I feel like a wet sack of potatoes sometimes. There's no springiness, there's no bounce, there's no athleticism at all. I was playing golf the other day and I realized how much slower my swing was than the people I was playing with, just because my athleticism it decreases so fast if you don't use it. And it's one thing when you're a kid and you're always out playing sports, but the older you get, man, like I said, it goes away quick. So one of the things that I really like doing is I'll spend a couple days a week doing fast explosive training. And with cables, you can do fast explosive rotational work, which is super beneficial, right? Just long story, a little bit shorter because it's already way too long, but doing that rotational work with explosiveness, doing explosive cable chops and things is awesome. But on a cable stack, if you're not using a heavy enough weight, there's momentum in those stacks, right? So I find myself winging the plate stack up off and slamming it into the top of the machine, and it just doesn't feel right. You don't get consistent resistance. With the Voltras, there's no momentum. I don't know how to describe it other than putting you on one to feel it, but there is no momentum. So if you like to train athletically, if you train for sports, if you train for a rotational sport like baseball, if you train for tennis, racquetball, golf, anything that involves rotation, which is really honestly most sports, man, this is super, super valuable. So all of a sudden, as I start thinking about all of these uses beyond just replacing a barbell and weights, which again, I don't think it will do, I'm like, man, these aren't nearly as expensive as I thought they were, because all of a sudden that value starts adding up and all the different things that you can do with this one product. And then you start walking around and seeing all the different mounting solutions. So that was something that I learned, was that the Voltra wasn't what I thought it was, and that I actually may want one eventually. Now, I don't know that I'm going to spend $2,500 or $5,000 on 2 of them, but hey, Beyond Power, if you're out there, and you want to send a couple to me, I will actually take them, where I probably would have turned them down before. So I did learn that. I also learned about the Ancore products. Now, there's a lot of companies out there who are providing what they would consider competing product, right? They're little boxes with a cable that comes out where you can dial in the resistance. Ancore was one at the show, very cool. They're used in a lot of professional sporting teams' training centers for exactly the reason I just said, because the ability to pull on a cable explosively without the momentum there and with consistent resistance across the thing is valuable for athletic training. Now, Ancore is not Voltra. That's one other thing that I learned, is that Ancore is not like, oh, it's just a cheaper version of Voltra. Why would I spend so much more on a Voltra? Voltra's worth the price difference, 100%. However, if your sole purpose of getting something like that is athletic training and that explosive kind of dynamic movement, especially rotational, man, the Ancore is a good solution. Now, the Ancore doesn't have the same feel. When you pull on the Voltra, it feels like a weight stack. It really does. Now, there's something I call the uncanny valley. For those of you who know about AI, you'll know what that is. The uncanny valley is when you like watch an AI person on screen, and as good as they look, there's just something in your human brain which goes, that's not a human, right? And there's just something off, and that's what's called the uncanny valley. And crossing that valley is where AI becomes indecipherable from people. Well, I think there's quite a bit of a valley on the Voltra. It is not a weight stack, right? It's just not the same. I don't think it's supposed to be the same. It's close enough though. The Ancore, that valley is pretty big. Like, it's a spring. You can tell it's a spring from the moment I grabbed it. I'm like, oh, that's a spring. Like just a spring inside. Now, it's a very, don't want to knock the Ancore guys. It's a very well designed spring. It feels great, but it's a spring and you can tell. So I don't think that, it's a good replacement for the Voltra if you're trying to do all those other things, the drop sets and the changing of the force curve and things like that. But like I said, if you just want to get your golf swing to be a little bit faster, if you just want to work on your baseball or your softball swing, if you want to work on your tennis swing, things like that where you're really working on some rotational stuff, if you want to do, like if you're a boxer or something and you want to work on resisted kind of presses or things like that and do those explosively, I think the Ancore is a great choice for you. So I learned that as well, that while there's a lot of products out there that say they're just a cheaper Voltra, they're not just a cheaper Voltra. They're a different product with their own use that has its own value. Now, the next thing that I learned, and speaking of things where technology does make things better than analog, and a whole bunch of you guys told me this, I need a gimbal. I learned that at this show, that I need a gimbal. I need a gimbal. So I shot a couple of live streams with my cell phone walking around like this, and apparently I'm a little shaky. So I'm a lot shaky. I watched the live streams back. It was almost unwatchable. And so I appreciate you guys who did watch it. And also the B-roll that I shot at the show, all of it was shaky because I just take my hands and I'm like, I'm Mr. Old Guy Analog. I don't need these fancy gimbals. And I need a fancy gimbal. So a lot of people that were there with some super high-end stuff. Jungle Gym Reviews, guys. Watch out for these guys. They have got their stuff together. And I will tell you that as good as Michael is on camera, the real magic to that channel is Mrs. Jungle Gym Reviews, because she was operating the gimbal and the camera and just does an amazing job. I've never been able to figure out how to use a gimbal, and they had this big old DJI Ronin, which is this like big contraption with a real nice big camera in it. I'm walking around with like a little tiny pocket camera. So, and look, the equipment, the gear doesn't always make the content. I would tell you, I found out the other day that Jonathan from No Fate 24/7 films all of his content on his cell phone, and Jonathan, I mean, I don't know how you do it, but it looks amazing. Like, I was so surprised to find that out. When I film stuff on my cell phone, it looks like I'm filming on a potato. It's just, it never comes out right. Maybe I'm using the wrong app, something like that. But in the end, I think I need to meet somewhere in the middle. I need to be a little bit nicer than a cell phone. I don't think I need to be as nice as Mrs. Jungle Gym Reviews is carrying around, but I promise you guys that next year I will have a gimbal so that my tours come out a little bit smoother. So sorry for making all you guys seasick, and myself too, because like I said, I watched it back and I'm like, oh, they're definitely right. And next one, we're gonna go from bad video to bad products. And I learned something pretty interesting. I've always wondered how products can get released to the marketplace and have such glaring opportunities. I know a lot of you guys feel the same way. Like a product will come out, and like I just did a video on how to fix the J-hooks and the Dane. They're just horrible. Out of the box, they're terrible. They're unpleasant to use. I don't know how they pass. I don't think anybody actually looked at them before they released them. I think they just let some Yahoo in the factory be like, hey, dude, make some J-hooks for us. And whatever came out, came out. Like, they're just terrible. But it's just because there's some little things that, like, there's some obvious things that needed to be fixed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch that video. But there's a couple things that just need to be fixed. And I always wondered, I'm like, how does a product get to market with such obvious issues? Like, I can understand if it's something hidden or something you didn't expect, or hey, if 1,000 people use it, like 2 people might experience this. I'm talking stuff that, like, out of the box, anybody who's been working out in a home gym for more than 6 months is like, well, that's a dumb idea. Or like, how does that stuff get to market? And I learned that this year at Home Gym Con. And the answer is product designers who were a little too proud of their products. And the cool thing about Home Gym Con, or one of the many cool things, was that there were a lot of product designers there. And it was really neat to get to talk to them. And some of them, like Force USA flew their product designer in from Australia. Not only was it cool because he could literally answer like any question you had, but he was there to get feedback from people. Like Force USA really listens. Like I talked about RitFit, like their product designers were there. They genuinely, like, they were like, no, come tell us what you think. Like, tell us what should be different. Tell us what should be better. And they were like, actually like wanted to know so that they could go make their products better. There were a bunch of times during the show where you could literally hear this conversation happening where like the product designer was like, man, that's a great idea. We'll definitely do that. Like, that's so awesome. Thank you. Like, a lot of that happened. A lot of something different happened too. And I'm not going to name names in this, but there were a couple of booths where they had some prototypes, and the prototypes were just not great. Like there was I'll walk around this one without calling out the company, but you'll be able to figure out who it is. There was a Smith machine, a bolt-on Smith machine there that just had so much play up and down. I think they call it lateral shear. It was awful, right? It wasn't great. It wasn't something that I would want for free. It wasn't something that I would recommend people buy. It just wasn't great. And when you pointed this out to the designer, he's like, oh, no, you want that because then it's gonna feel more like an actual bar when you're squatting. I'm like, dude, come on, man, really? Like, talk about the shiniest turd in the litter box. Like, that's just such a horrible response. But it really gave some insight that, you know, these product designers, they've worked their hearts out and they've invested a lot in this product, and they're bringing it to a show, and they're like, this is hopefully they're thinking this is the best I've got, right? Hopefully they're putting their best foot forward. So I can see being defensive, right? I can see being like, don't tell me my products, but when there's glaring issues, to then like be like, no, there's not. It's supposed to be that way. Like, and I saw that happen a bunch of times at the show with a few different designers. And it was like, guys, like, I now understand how a bad product gets to market. You've got these people who are in their own little bubble, and they don't want to take feedback from anybody. They don't want anybody to tell them that something should be different. They don't want to think about the headache it's going to be to go, because guys, once you define one of these products, in fairness to them, like if somebody goes, oh, you should move the bolt from this side to this side, they're like, oh, well, that's 3 months of design work that I have to redo. Like, it's a big deal to make small changes. So I get it, especially if you're working with overseas factories who are like maybe already tooled up to make something. It might be easier just to be like, to try and justify why something is bad than to go to the factory and be like, time out, guys, we got to change this. So, but anyway, in a long-winded way, I like to do things that way, I learned how bad products got to market. And it was interesting to see that firsthand. And it was also interesting that, you know, the companies that had those defensive designers were all kind of mid-level companies that aren't necessarily making a bunch of waves, and maybe kind of releasing some products that I'm not so happy that they're releasing. And then the companies who were interested and were involved and engaged with the people there, and you could tell were like legitimately taking feedback from people and wanted it and desired it, those companies are all doing really well. So I don't think that's a coincidence, but it was very interesting to see that in real life. And speaking of seeing things in real life, that brings us to the next thing I learned, which is small fabricators, you got to see their stuff in real life. You just have to see it. Just the internet doesn't do it justice. I've talked about this a few times so far in this podcast. Seeing things only online it does not relay what they're like in real life. ATX is a great example. We could talk about ATX till we're blue in the face. Until you get on their stuff, you're not going to understand why everybody's excited who was at the show. It's just, there's so many things that, the Voltras. What I thought in my head, once I got in front of that and used it, just not the same thing, right? And that was the case with a lot of the small inventors. Mutant Metals was a great example. I have followed Mutant Metals' Instagram account for a very long time, and all of it looks, man, the finishes look really cool, the knurling looks really cool, the design looks really cool. And then you get in front of the Mutant Metals booth and you feel the knurl and you're like, oh, no picture will ever relay what that feels like. You get in front of some of these finishes, guys, I'm telling you, some of the finishes at the Mutant Metals booth were just like, no picture in the world could relay what it looked like when the light hit it at a certain angle and you were walking by and the color shifted. It was so, so, so cool. Matt Porter's stuff was another one where I can tell you till you're blue in the face why a cable attachment is worth $300. And I bought a $330 cable attachment from him at the show. And a lot of people, when you see it, people are gonna go, that's crazy. Why would you spend that much on that? Once you feel it and you feel how it works, it's just, you gotta be in front of this stuff. Buffalo Bully Fabrication, I did a whole video on them. And looking at their stuff, like I tried to get across in the video and show you close-ups and things, but until you're actually there and you see just how crisp and precise everything is, how much care has gone into it, just the quality level is so many steps above most of the mass-produced stuff that we see. These small fabricators, guys, one of the best reasons to go to Home Gym Con, yeah, it's cool to see all of Rep's racks in real life. It's cool to see the Rogue booth. It's cool to see, to try out the cardio stuff that people have and all the stuff that people did when they were there. But to me, one of the biggest reasons to go to Home Gym Con and to go to this show is to see all of these little guys and see, these one-man shops who just, this is what they love. They do it because they love it. It's related to the designer thing we just talked about, which is when people really want to make the best thing possible for the home gym community and want to put their best foot forward, man, these things are amazing. Like they're just so cool. Darko is another one. Darko has a great following. His business is exploding right now for good reason. But as cool as his stuff looks online and on Instagram, when you get in front of these and you put them in your hand and you feel the weight of them and you feel the quality of the manufacturer and you see the colors and you see just all of the work that goes into it, man, like I said, one thing that I learned is these small guys, you've got to see them in real life or you can't appreciate the quality and you can't appreciate why they ask what they ask for their products. I see a lot of people online who are like, I would never pay that much for a whatever. And it's like, if they put it in your hand, you might. Like there was a lot of people who walked up to these booths and they're like, oh my goodness, look at this. Like I saw that happen over and over and over again. So very, very cool to see the small fabricators. If you're thinking about going to Home Gym Con and is there a reason to go and what will you get out of it? That's definitely something I don't hear enough people talking about. I talked about it in my last podcast that one of my plans next year is to really highlight and showcase all of these small vendors. Most of them don't have affiliate programs, so they don't get very much love, if any at all. And man, you just need to see this stuff. Arm Assassin Strength Shop's another one. You look on their website and it's like, that's a bunch of crazy looking stuff. You go there and you put it in your hands and you see how it works and why it's designed how it's designed and how it activates different muscles. And you're like, oh man, this stuff's amazing. But you gotta be there to experience it. And speaking of the detail level of these small fabricators, the next thing that I learned at Home Gym Con, and I made a whole video, this is what I titled my ATX video, was Details Matter. Turns out that anybody with investment capital can go and talk to a factory in China and go put a back pad on a base and then put a cable and a weight stack and slap all that together and put my brand here and let's sell it, right? And it'll work, right? Because a lot of these factories in China, they make fitness equipment. That's what they do. They can make something passable. But when you put it on the floor next to somebody who's actually paid attention to detail, it's just night and day. And that's, I think, where I think a lot of companies, A, need to step up their game, but B, the people that are going to win in an ever-expanding marketplace of stuff that's all the same, like legit guys, for the most part, if you were to take somebody not knowledgeable in gym equipment and walk them through the floor at Home Gym Con, they'd be like, why is everybody selling the same thing, right? Like to a non-educated consumer, they're going to be like, this is all the same stuff. And in function it is, it's all benches, it's all racks, it's all cable systems, it's all leg presses. But when you go, and I'll use Temple of Gains as an example, they showed a leg press there which was spectacular. And the reason it was spectacular is because of the attention to detail. All of the small things were in the right place. All of the touch points were perfectly crafted and perfectly put in the right place. The feel of the unit was exactly what you would want from a leg press. The depth you could get, the range you could get, getting in and out, how the weights were loaded, how the unit was situated, how the seat felt. Like these little details all make a product that is going to outsell the competition, not because it does something different, but because it does that same thing much differently and much better. And that, to be honest, is why I titled the ATX video, Details Matter. My statement at the beginning of that video was, ATX doesn't make anything that everybody else doesn't make. They just don't. They make a couple of products that you don't see a lot of people making, but they make this cool standing chest press. I guarantee you that after what a big hit it was at the show, you're gonna see 4 or 5 other companies make a standing chest press, right? It's just, they're gonna copycat it and that's what's gonna happen. So the issue is nobody's going to make one with the attention to detail that ATX does. So as I walked around the booth in ATX, I had shot a bunch of individual product reviews that I'm not going to post, or I may post them as shorter videos down the road. What I decided to do is I went back at the end of the show and I just shot a video just trying to show you guys some of the details, because like I said, as this industry grows, what I learned at the show is it's the guys who are going to pay attention to the detail are going to be some of the ones who do the best and make the best equipment. And the people who aren't paying attention to detail are going to make J-hooks like on my Dane. So they're just, guys, those were so bad. I've never had something that I not only physically disliked using every time I touched it, but caused me physical pain to use it. And those J-hooks were that. They had to be changed. And it was really, like I said, a lack of attention to detail. So definitely learn that. Details matter. And for anybody out there who's working for a company that watches this video, take some lessons from those smaller fabricators and look at every single detail on your product and make sure that everything there is there for a reason and is the best version of that thing that it can be. Now, number 10 out of 11, I probably listed a whole lot more, but it's 10th on my list, is that pendulum squats are overrated. We're talking about companies making stuff and then one thing is successful and you see a bunch of other people make it. There were a lot of pendulum squats there. And they were something that a lot of people wanted to try out. I was surprised how many people are like, I want to go try so-and-so's pendulum squat. I want to go and try so-and-so's pendulum squat. And well, ATX's pendulum squat was a little bit smaller, but the one over at, I think Temple of Gains had one, was much easier to get into. And then Temple of Gains used a counterweight, whereas, ATX used reverse banding, and the pendulum squats were kind of a big source of attention at the show. And as I'm looking at these things, I couldn't figure it out, guys. Like, I just learned that some things get a lot of buzz because they're new, but I would be surprised if there's a bunch of pendulum squats at next year's show. Number one, they take up the space of a small car. Like, if you guys remember the Yugo, it's about the size of a Yugo, right? Maybe a large motorcycle, like a Goldwing or something like that. Do they still make Goldwings? One of those big Harley baggers, right? With just a big old motorcycle. They cost about the same amount, right? They cost several $1,000s, and they do one thing. So if you owned a commercial gym, awesome piece to have. It's a great way for people with back issues to squat and really, really focus in on the quads. Like, these things light up your quads like no other squat, like no other leg press machine that I've been in. But as I use them, here's what I kept thinking. I can get the same training effect. I can get a better training effect with a heavily loaded Bulgarian split squat. Give somebody a couple of 50-pound dumbbells and have them knock out 6 to 8 reps of Bulgarian split squats with nice depth. And not only is that easy on your back, not only will that light up your quads like nobody's business, like as good as any pendulum squat out there, but it'll also work your hamstrings, work your glutes, work your core, work your lats. Like if you're doing those right, work your cardio, work your balance. Like those things are so much better. And I can do them I could do them 20 different ways in the gym with the stuff that I already have now without buying a small car to put in my garage. So like I said at the beginning, it might be some hot takes. I know there's a lot of pendulum squat fans out there because I saw some of you at the show, but man, of all the things there that I thought were overrated, and there were a few, I'm going to talk about those in another podcast, but pendulum squats were definitely one of them. So I learned that I will never own a pendulum squat, and I'm going to say that these are going to be like the next reverse hyper. Big expensive things that people buy because they think they're cool, 6 months later realize that they probably shouldn't have spent the money, and they are going to have almost no resale value because they just take up too much room. So just beware. I'm calling it right now. If I'm wrong, but I'm going to put my stake in the ground on that one right now and tell you that I don't think pendulum squats are really going to succeed or survive as a viable piece of garage gym gear for most garage gym owners. And now on to the last thing that I learned, and that is that the home gym community, the people that were there, the people that I love, you, my home gym and garage gym brothers and sisters, and the hardcore garage gym companies, the Rogues, the Reps, the Titans, the Bells of Steel, the Fringe Sports, the ATXs, well, not ATX, I'm gonna keep them off the list now and you'll see why, are way out of touch with the other 90% of people that work out at home. What I realized was it's really fun to go to the show and be in this little bubble of people who all love this stuff. There were people walking around with I think it said Home Gym Nerd or Home Gym Geek shirt. I looked, I couldn't figure out where to buy those. They probably sold them at the Barbell Voodoo booth where I got this shirt, if I had to guess. But man, I saw a lot of people with those and I wanted one, but we were all home gym nerds. I think that's actually what the shirt said. We're all home gym nerds. We are very preoccupied with the size of the uprights on a rack and how big the holes are, whether it's metric or metric or freedom units. We are very concerned with the fit and finish and the knurl of a handle and whether something is UHMW or a different kind of and that's awesome. Guys, that's one of the reasons I love going to this show is that I can put on my giant nerd hat and nerd out about this stuff as much as possible. But I think that what we forget, and almost more importantly, what a lot of companies forget, is that we are not representative of most of the people out there who want to work out at home. I'd say 90% of the people that train at home don't care what size uprights they have. They don't care what gauge the steel is. They don't care about most of the things that we care about, right? The problem comes in that, number one, the community then bags on products that aren't made for them. And I'm going to use a few as an example. Force USA, RitFit, and a lot of the ATX all-in-one racks. I heard a lot of people complaining about those for various reasons. And the reasons that all boil down to this. I, as a home gym nerd, wouldn't put one of those in my house. There's been a really good discussion on the ATX video that I did where a lot of people are like, nope, wrong size upright, wrong size holes, they're never gonna work. They're never gonna make it in America. And I think what we forget as home gym nerds is that 90% of the people out there could give a crap if a Rep Pegasus seat will fit on their new ATX rack. They're gonna be like, hey, does ATX make a seat? Oh, they do? Okay, I'll take that one, right? And the interesting thing, and the reason why I've used all three of those companies as examples is I've had this specific conversation with all three of them, where somebody at the company is like, man, it's crazy. So many customers log onto our website and they put an all-in-one trainer in the cart, then they put a bench, they put a barbell, they put weights, they put dumbbells, they put storage, they put flooring, they put some workout clothes, they put a lifting belt, they put barbell collars, they put all of that stuff, and they build a $10 or a $15 or a $20,000 shopping cart, and they click buy now, and if there's assembly available, they add that, and that is the one first and last and only time that customer is ever going to buy home gym equipment. They only want to buy it from one store. They only want to buy it one time, and they are not ever going to watch another home gym YouTube video. They're never going to go to a home gym store. They're never going to go to Home Gym Con. They're never going to go back to Rep's website or Force USA's website or ATX's website. They're just going to buy a gym for their house, and that's it. And what I learned at the show is that we all need to understand that that not only are those people out there, they make up the vast majority of home gym people. And when we start doing things like talking down about certain equipment, and I'm 100% guilty of this. You could go back in my videos and point out a lot of places where I'm guilty of this. The problem is that when we do that, it's fine if we're talking to each other, but when we're in a more public forum or we're trying to make comments to help people, we're not helping anybody by knocking that stuff because we don't realize that they aren't us. More importantly than that, I think there's a big miss in the industry where I think more companies like Rep, more companies like Rogue, and I don't know that Rogue will ever do it just because of how they built their company, but more companies like Titan, I think that they need to make stuff to just knock your major fitnesses and your Macolos out of the marketplace and just out of business. I would much rather be able to tell, like my brother's a great example. My brother has a horrible gym in his basement. Not only is it in his basement, totally wrong room of the house, but it's stuff that I'm like, man, he's got mismatched weight plates, which drives me nuts. You can't have different size and color plates on each side of the bar. It doesn't work that way. But it's just stuff that I would never use, but he loves it. He works out there all the time, and he's a great example of your average home gym person. I just want some stuff where I can go down, and a couple times a week I go down there and I work out, and I try and stay strong because his son's 5 years old and his son's going to be kicking his butt by next year probably, so he's got to work out, right? And I would love to be able to go to him and go, here's something affordable, but it's from Rep Fitness. Here's something affordable that is what you're looking for. And I think that's one of the things that ATX is going to do really well in our market with is I don't think that customer, like my brother's got money. He could buy a $5,000 rack if he wanted to. And if I was able to go to him and go, look, go to ATX and buy this rack. It's got everything that you need on it. It's going to be the quality level of the rest of the stuff in your house. You're really going to like it. You don't have to shop for a ton of different stuff. You can buy everything at one store. And that's where I think that the ATX racks that they brought are really going to succeed. They're not going to sell a ton of those racks to the home gym nerds, but I do think they're going to sell a ton of those racks to just the other 90% of the people out there. And I think that there's a big miss in our industry. And I really learned that there's this like blind spot for a lot of companies where they're focused on us, which I love, right? I love that they make equipment for us, but I really wish that they would do this and just offer a few more things, even if they had to offshore them, even if they had to just, even if Rep Fitness is like, okay, we're gonna white label a couple things, but we're gonna make sure that our touches and our fit and finish and our quality assurance standards are in those things. And then that way, we can go. And that's why I like Force USA so much. And that's why I like the ATX stuff so much, is because those are a couple of companies where I can go to people and go, where should you buy your all-in-one trainer? You should buy a Force USA C10, right? Why is it $5,500? Let me show you why. Why is it $4,500? Let me show you why. Let me show you why it's worth $2,000 more than the Macolo rack. And a lot of people will go for that. So anyway, that's kind of I didn't realize I also learned that I brought a soapbox to this podcast. So let me get off the soapbox. But it was just something that as I was walking around, I'm like I said, Jake is a good example. I'm a good example. A lot of us in this space are like, everybody needs a home gym, right? It's critical to the health and well-being of people, right? Like, this is why I do this for a living, is to help people. And I think that would help people. So, but anyway, so that's the 11 things that I learned at Home Gym Con. Hopefully this isn't too much Home Gym Con content for you, because I got probably 3 more podcasts that are inspired by Home Gym Con that are coming out. One of which is going to be a hot take episode, which I'm a little bit leery to put out, but I'm going to put it out anyway, because there's some big changes coming to the gym. There's some things that happen at Home Gym Con that really haven't sat well with me. But anyway, we'll get to that then. Outside of that, we're going to talk about what I bought at Home Gym Con. We're also going to do an episode on trend spotting, some of the trends that I see going away, like pendulum squats, like some of the trends that I see coming down the pike. I'm going to be interested to see what you guys think about which ones are going to live, which ones are going to die. But anyway, those are all for episodes down the road. As usual, thank you guys for watching this long. Thank you guys for tuning in, liking, subscribing, sharing, all that kind of fun stuff, buying through the affiliate links down below so that I can actually go to Home Gym Con and bring you that kind of coverage. But that is all I have for today. You all go have a great day. And until the next episode, I'm Tim with GymCrafter.